Good morning, everyone. How you all doing today? I'm just letting people through to the lobby. We'll get started in a few moments. Yeah, there's quite a number of people online today, so welcome. If you're not on mute, if you can mute yourself, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So it's 1 minute past 1. I might start now, so we just run on time today. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. Sending a warm welcome to everyone here today with us. So we are up to webinar number 4 for our Research and Evaluation Network for this year. And the theme of the webinar today is ChatGPT and AI, implications of automated decision making for the social services sector. So we're a large group today with over 150 registrations for today's event. Before we get started, I thought I'd mention also that this week is Data Science and AI Week across Australasia. And this year, our event today is recognised as an official event. So the Data Science and AI Week brings together a community of data scientists, technologists and visualizers, educators to raise awareness around data science, increase the uptake of data science training, projects and activities, and discuss trending topics and ideas. So welcome to anyone who has joined us online who's connected to the DSA-IW community today. So for the agenda, I'm going to give a 10-minute introduction and overview of our network and tell you a bit more about our Research and Evaluation Resources Hub. I'm then going to hand it over to our guest speaker for today's event, Professor Paul Henman, who will give the presentation. There'll be some time for some Q&A after Paul's presentation, and I'll also highlight some upcoming opportunities that you may like to get involved with. A couple of housekeeping things to note. By default, you will be on mute, but your camera will be turned on. So this session will be recorded. If you don't want your face shown on the recording, please feel free to turn your camera off. For today, if during Q&A you would like to ask a question, please write the question in the Q&A function. There is a chat pane too, but because of the large number of registrations, we'd appreciate you using the Q&A box to help us identify direct questions to us rather than the general comments. The other option is you can use your hand emoji, raise your hand emoji, and then take yourself off mute to ask the question. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we're meeting today, the Yagara and Turrbal people here in Meanjin in Brisbane. I'd like to acknowledge them as the oldest living continuing cultures in human history. I would like to pay my respects to all First Nations colleagues joining us online today. QCOS thanks First Nations people for the gift of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We look forward to supporting work leading to a successful referendum to enshrine a First Nations voice to Parliament in the Australian Constitution, followed by Makarrata and treaty. QCOS welcomes the invitation to walk with First Nations people in a movement for the Australian people for a better future. For those online, please feel free to join us in acknowledging country where you are today through the chat function as well. So my name is Amy Dellett. I am the Data and Reporting Analyst in the Research and Policy team at QCOS, and I coordinate our Research and Evaluation Network webinars and our online forum. So as a quick overview for those who may be new to the network, the Research and Evaluation Network is about collaboration and knowledge sharing with the intention to identify shared challenges and emerging issues in the community services sector, which allows us to then respond and provide advice on matters relating to research and evaluation. It's also an opportunity to share perspectives and shape the QCOS research and evaluation agenda. You can access our Research and Evaluation Network webinar recordings and resources on the Community Door Research and Evaluation Resources Hub page. And you can access the page by clicking on the link on the slide, and I'll share these in the chat pane too. Just sharing those now. So we also have a QCOS Research and Evaluation Forum that sits within Microsoft Teams platform. So currently we have 60 members and guests on the forum. The idea behind the forum is that we're providing a space for the community services sector and our network members to collaborate and exchange ideas and to access professional development opportunities as well. So it's the best way to stay up to date with our network and our network webinars. So joining the forum is a two-step process. So if you haven't already done this, you can submit a request to join the forum through our QCOS website using the EOI link. And I've also shared that in the chat as well. And so when we receive the request form, we'll add you as a guest user and send you a welcome message to the forum. You may be wondering why we're all here today and how we're selecting the topics for the network this year. So at the end of last year, we surveyed our network members and asked what focus topics or activities would you most likely be interested in our research and evaluation network hosting. And so automation, big data, machine learning and AI was voted as an area of interest by almost half of the participants surveyed. This webinar has also received our highest number of registrations for our research evaluation network so far. So we know that there is a high level of interest. So it is quite challenging and potentially overwhelming as an individual and the community sector as a whole to keep up with the volume of information shared on AI and ChatGPT, particularly in the last 6 months and I think even in the last few weeks. So for context, to give you an idea of the interest in AI, on the Google Trends data for Australia, it's showing an increasingly climbing interest for AI and ChatGPT searches, 4 times that of searches 6 months ago. And the World Economic Forum just released their Future of Jobs report this month, with AI and machine learning specialists topping the list as the fastest growing jobs. It's also estimated that AI will be worth $22.17 trillion to the global economy by 2030. Responses to a McKinsey survey in the state of AI in 2022 and a half-decade review report indicated that the average number of AI capabilities that organizations use, such as natural language generation and computer vision, has doubled from 1.9 in 2018 to 3.8 in 2020. The proportion of respondents who say their organizations have adopted at least one function increased from, at least one AI function, has increased from 20% in 2017 to 50% in 2022. Just in the last few weeks, Microsoft has made its AI-powered Bing search engine and Edge browser available to everyone. An AI assistant has popped up in Snapchat. There's data visualization software. Tableau has just announced the Tableau GPT powered by Einstein. The godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, recently resigned from his position at Google to be able to speak publicly on the potential dangers of AI. We've had Elon Musk also comment that AI presents profound risks to society and humanity and has called for a pause on the development of AI systems. In the federal budget announcements on Tuesday, AI will receive 4.12 million boost, supporting the Responsible Artificial Intelligence Network by extending the National Artificial Intelligence Centre and the new Responsible AI Adopt program. I think we all, to some degree, have been exposed to the implications of AI and automated decision making in the sector, and the prominent and harmful example often drawn upon being Robodebt. So I don't want to take up any further time today. It's fantastic that we have Paul Henman here with us to unpack some of this and provide some insights for the sector about what automation and AI means and the implications and opportunities for the sector. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Paul Henman. Professor Paul Henman is a Chief Investigator at the University of Queensland node of the ARC Centre of Excellence for Automated Decision Making and Society. Paul holds degrees in sociology, social policy, computer science and education. For over 2 decades, he has studied the nexus between digital technologies, social policy, and public administration, and the implications for citizens, public governance, and power. Paul's work includes the use of new digital research methods, including web crawling, social network analysis, and online user experiments. Paul is author of Governing Electronically, Performing the State, and Administering Welfare Reform. Prior to his academic career, Paul worked in the Australian Public Service, where he asked too many career-limiting questions. At the end of Paul's presentation, we will have some time for Q&A, like I mentioned. And so I had the pleasure of connecting with Paul face-to-face at our roundtable event QCOS co-hosted with UQ last year around unpacking automation with Professor Virginia Eubanks, exploring lessons from the US. So welcome, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will hand it over to you and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Amy, and I'm just working out how to share the screen. Yes, the right thing. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate and contribute to your evaluation network today. And Amy, as she mentioned, approached me about talking about ChatGPT and AI, the implications for automated decision making for social service sector. Before I get started, I do want to acknowledge from my area where I'm sitting currently at the University of Queensland St Lucia campus, and I want to acknowledge the traditional owners, the custodians, the Yagara and Turrbal people where I'm located, and recognise it has always been a place of learning, a place of meeting of people. Now, I know Amy, actually, when she sent out the invitation to this particular event, invited you to come with your examples of using ChatGPT. And whilst we will see how much time we have, I would be keen to have you share those examples in the chat so that we can see how people have you been using ChatGPT, either is like the playing or whether they're actually you've even tried to use it in an organisational context. Preparing for this talk, I didn't want to make any assumptions about people's level of knowledge about computation and digital technology. So I want to begin now talking about understanding some of the key concepts. And then I would like to talk a bit about the implications of new and emerging digital technologies in the community sector. And then finally talk about potentially a vision for the future. What do we need to do here? So the first thing I want in terms of thinking about understanding key concepts, one of the key concepts that we have underpinning everything is the concept of algorithms. The other ones I want to explore are automated decision making, big data, AI, machine learning, and ChatGPT. So first of all, algorithms, which we often think about as a computer algorithm, is really the idea of an algorithm is something much more ancient and something what we do every day. They're everywhere, and it's in a sense an algorithm as the definition there says is a process or set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations, especially by a computer. But when we think about it, an algorithm can also be just like the recipe below, where a recipe says what are the inputs, what are the steps that we need to take, and what is the output that we expect from that. So thinking about algorithm as something that we do every day in fairly mundane things is important because it highlights the ways in which computers are just another way of processing some inputs to produce some outputs. So where are we getting the next steps in terms of automated decision making and big data? So automation, computer and digital technology has two different dimensions to it. One of the key things is that it automates things, and we often see that process, especially in the case of Robodebt, where we automated a process that had significant levels of manual involvement. But the other side of digital technology is it has what we might call informatization. It produces information. It holds and manipulates symbols, and that's a very important role too, because the digital technology is able to enhance our knowledge of things, or enhance our storage of knowledge of things. Now, the concept of big data on the right-hand side is something that came up probably about 10 years ago. And the concept was driven by not only the recognition of the significant and exponential growth of computer capacity, and that's both in terms of speed, in processing speed, but also storage capacity. And on the left-hand side, we can see this exponential growth of transistors available within computers and on chips. And that's called Moore's law. And see, it said that the capacity doubles every 18 months. And so that leads to this exponential process. So this is the underpinning of big data, but it's not just the volume of data, it's the velocity and what we're increasingly recognizing as the variety. And so we include text, we include images, audio and everything like that. And this is the underpinning of the concept of big data and the way in which big data can be a way in which to learn more about the world that we have. I'm not going to go into the pluses and minuses of that today, but recognize that big data is really the underpinnings for what machine learning is. So we heard about artificial intelligence. This concept of artificial intelligence is more than 50 years old, but it's not new. And I would have to say that artificial intelligence, as we hear about today, is more of a marketing term rather than a technical term. What computer scientists would talk about is talk about machine learning. And the key thing in terms of machine learning is that what we're doing with machine learning, and this is where big data is necessary for the machine learning to occur, is that it learns patterns based in the data that's provided. And it is an algorithm that produces an algorithm. Now, I want to compare that with what we would normally call hard coding or processes with this example of facial recognition. So if you and I were told to sit down and work out a task and work out an algorithm, a step-by-step process to work out how do we identify the features of someone's face and recognize that as someone else, as the same face or a different face from another picture. And we might do what this image does, is try to identify the key features of the face and then work out, well, what are the measurements, and see whether we can see patterns in that. Now, that's what we would use as a form of hard coding. It's a fairly complex problem, but machine learning, in a sense, does away with all of that and says, okay, we don't have any pre-assumptions. We will basically train the system to say this is a face and this is another version of the face, and the algorithm learns and tries to identify patterns all by itself, but it also learns by providing matches or similar faces of the same people to see, yes, and it learns that these are the same people. And so this is an important process where, in a sense, machine learning, humans that develop these machine learnings don't have any preconceptions about how the algorithm is going to make its decision. It just learns and tries to make sure that it's most accurate as possible. Now, there's two forms of machine learning. There's supervised and unsupervised. And supervised ones where we, like this facial recognition, where I'll give you another example. On YouTube, probably 15 years ago, decided to create a machine learning algorithm to see whether I could identify cats in a video or an image. And it basically gave it hundreds and thousands or even millions of images, and some with cats and some without cats. And so it was learning that certain images had cats in it and certain images didn't have cats. So that's a supervised learning, because it's telling you what the output is that you're expecting it to have. And as a result, the algorithm was able to detect cats in the images much better than humans were. And unsupervised learning is where the algorithm, the machine learning algorithm, seeks to learn its own forms of patterns and clusters the data in ways it makes sense. So it doesn't have any preconceived ideas about what should and shouldn't, what the outcome is. So this is where we get to the question of generative AI and large language models, which is what ChatGPT is. So generative AI is a class of AI. As I mentioned, what before is that when we do a supervised learning, it basically leads to a situation where we then put in a new example and that it hasn't seen, and then you ask it to tell the solution. Another example in social services might be when we train a model to identify whether a child has been child notification leads to that child eventually being put in out-of-home care or not. So we can then say, put all of these, each child that comes into from the history, from our data sets, we can create a model where we have child notifications that were placed in out-of-home care, child notifications that weren't placed in out-of-home care, or you could train it on whether risk or abuse was evident or not. And this is a form of determinative or discriminative AI, where basically you're training it to do something and it comes along and sees something new, and it tries to determine what category it fits in. Generative AI is something different. It creates a model of the world that then is able to generate a new space in that world. So as we go, like we can see with the facial recognitions, what generative AI is doing is, rather than identifying faces, is creating new faces. And this growth of generative AI is what's really taking the world by storm. ChatGPT is a generative AI. As you can see, that you put something in, it's generating text. It's not returning a search result, which is what a lot of the like Google and all of those are. That produces a result that it is known. ChatGPT is producing completely new text based on risk statistical relationships between phrases, words, even parts of words, and what are the most likely words and phrases that follow after that. So that's why you might get some some people call hallucination when using ChatGPT. Just as an example, I use this Skybox website, which can create 3D worlds. You can play with this one. I just typed in, can we create a 3D world of social equality and community environmental sustainability? Now, I'm not quite sure exactly how this relates to social equality and community environmental sustainability, but that's another example of a generative AI. And there's a lot of people using things that create different things. I guess I've got a digital painting was the style that was produced in. But similarly, there is a range of other generative AI tools that actually can be used to create audio, create images, and this one is a 3D process. Similarly, Eminem, someone's created music which is from Eminem. I might just play a few seconds of it. So any M&M's fans, I don't know, but that is completely AI generated. The lyrics, the music, and the voice, and it sounds just like Eminem. And it was actually there's been a number of attempts to create songs like that have been actually put on Spotify and then withdrawn when realized it was created with AI. So you can see, you can, just like you could do with Midjourney, which is a visual space, you can say, I want to generate an image in the style of Van Gogh, or I want to create an image in the style of Michelangelo. And it has learnt what these styles are. And so you can do that also with ChatGPT. You can say, can you rewrite me a little short story in the style of um, a famous novelist, and it will pick up on some of those things. Sorry.
Sorry, Paul, we just had some comments in the chat saying that people couldn't hear the Eminem song. I couldn't hear it either. Do you have a link that we could share with the group? We could.
Okay, I'm probably not. I probably can't do it just in the middle of the
Yeah,
presentation.
that's okay. We'll share it after the presentation, or in the even in the post event mail out. Thank you.
Yeah. So ChatGPT, which is probably the most famous and well known at the moment, is from OpenAI's GPT-4. It's progressing rapidly. I've just put in the chat there, explain what a large language model is in 150 words. I said 150 word, and it just knows what I'm speaking. So a large language model is an advanced artificial intelligence system designed to understand and generate human language. But a key thing that I was trying to say before is that's the third sentence, is these models are trained on massive amounts of text data from various sources, enabling them to learn statistical patterns and relationships within the language. So it's learning patterns and with relationships within language, but it doesn't have any understanding. And so that's why it can produce things that look real and sound real. What some people might say called bullshit, where you actually can say certain things and sound like you know what you're talking about. I think so. Someone like Scott Morrison might have come to mind. But then that's it. You need to make sure that it actually is accurate what it is saying. So I'm just wondering if there's any questions before I move on to the next thing about implications or challenges. So I just can't see the chat from here.
There's nothing in the chat so far, and nothing in the Q&A.
Okay,
so yeah, if people do want to ask questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or the Q&As
I'll keep going
as we
because we
go.
don't have much time. So what are the implications and challenges for thinking about community service sector? I think one of the things that I wanted to talk first about is generative AI is so new, and I was actually asked yesterday to talk about, well, what might generative AI mean for social services, and it's really left me scratching my head at this point in time. And I think we're still coming to grips with what automation, widespread automation, and for decision making, and also machine learning is being across the world. So a Robodebt, as I was indicated over there on the left-hand side, is a traditionally coded algorithm. There's nothing significant or smart about it, but you can see the havoc that it wrought across the country as it occurred. I would actually say Robodebt was a political event that was enabled by digital technology rather than a problem with digital technology. There's been examples in the New South Wales Treasury that it was using technology to automate wage garnishing, which actually was then found to be unlawful as well. But the other forms of ways in which technology is being used is very much in profiling systems. And I thought it's very interesting in the Netherlands, the Syrie case used a risk form of profiling beneficiaries for fraud. It was challenged under the EU Human Rights Act and was found to be unlawful. This is not making specific decisions like Robodebt was. It's actually identifying to people, these people might be higher risk of fraud for investigation. The court of The Hague tossed it out, and as a result, the whole entire cabinet, the Dutch cabinet, handed in their resignations to the King of the Netherlands, a very different political response to the problem of using digital technology unlawfully. We can see profiling systems where basically often being used to identify risk. So child maltreatment risk, recidivism risk, and terrorism risk. These are not making decisions, but they are underpinning and shaping decisions. And as such, that are also they're being used in the tax office. So when you put in your tax return will go through a risk calculator to see, does your tax return look like other people who have the same kind of work and demographic profile? And does it fit within that? And if so, it's just ticked off. And if it doesn't, it might be investigated. And a lot of these things are underpinning a quite low level preceding decisions. The other thing is the Job Seeker Classification Index is another long-term risk profiling system. We're also seeing a lot of use of AI and machine learning for identification. So Centrelink used facial recognition for identifying in a brief way and after the bushfires in the 2019. Voice recognition for Centrelink, most people will be aware of. Overseas, some people have tried to use dialect recognition to identify whether there's someone claiming for refugee and asylum actually from the region that they say they're from. Biometrics, fingerprinting is being used in the parole system in Queensland. And we also prediction and classification, the UK machine learning's been there. Geolocation is being used. For example, in the US, the Obama administration indicated that carers for people with disability under Medicaid needed to have electronic visit verification so that the carer could, so that when the carer came to your house to deliver the services to you, it was confirmed that that carer was with you. The problem has been unintentionally is that it's meant that carers can't take the person with a disability shopping or anything like that. So it's meant that people with disability have then been imprisoned in their houses, in a sense, geo-imprisoned because of this new system. And in terms of ChatGPT, I'm aware that Queensland government officials are now writing ministerials using ChatGPT. So there's a lot of examples of exploding in this space, and they have both positive and quite positively negative outcomes. So what are the implications of these things? Well, first of all, there is the question of automated decision making. So this is when a technology is actually making an administrative decision in law. So the first question is it lawful? Robodebt wasn't lawful. And the New South Wales Ombudsman has written a document called the New Machinery of Government. And it has a number of, on pages 78 and 79, has a number of really important considerations. So to ask ourselves, is the use of the technology visible? Is it explainable? Is it reviewable? Now, one of the issues that this Robodebt highlighted for us is that we have a system where we, in law, that administrative processes and appeals of individual decisions. It's kind of on the basis of assumption that an individual is making a decision about an individual case. But when we have places like Robodebt, where algorithms are making decisions systemically, we have systemic errors. And we actually have no legal capacity to challenge the systemic decision-making process. And the only way that occurred within Australia was by reference to a class action to highlight that systemic aspect, but we still are limited legally with addressing those things. The other implications and challenges is that a lot of these things are subterranean to decisions. Like I said, risk prediction tools are used for streaming and are not actual part of decisions. So they actually can't be challenged under administrative law. And the other thing is that taking the perspective of clients or service users, especially when we have a digital first, is that that leads to a lot of digital exclusion that many of you probably are quite aware of. And also vulnerabilities for abuse from other people. So we can see Centrelink systems being abused by abusers to continue to abuse ex-partners and the like. So what does this mean for the future? What are first of all, I think that there is a future. We need to understand that a future is built on social and political values. And as I said about Robodebt, I think that it was a political episode more than a technological episode. And so it is if we want to consider a future, we need to make sure that we're embodying and are mobilised in the social and political values that we want to see. And technology isn't a solution in and of itself. But technology can embed certain social and political values, and it's important that the values that are embedded within them reflect what it is that we want. So I think in terms of one of the futures is how do we design digital technology to support social service users? And in many ways, it's quite difficult to get government to do things, but some of the recommendations to the Robodebt Commission are put up there. The one is the first thing is to say, let's move to genuine co-design. And there's something that governments are reluctant to do. But if you're actually trying to recognise the ways in which digital technologies impact on the lived experience of people, you need to have genuine co-design so it actually works with the lived experience of people. We can also put in frameworks, legal frameworks. The technology compliance framework was introduced at the behest of the then a Labor opposition and the Greens under the last government to the Workforce Australia, where the technology compliance framework is a legal framework that says any decisions made under the Workforce Australia, algorithmic decisions need to be consistent with human rights, not unbiased and transparent. That the implications of this in law is still playing its way out. We need to use technology, and we can use technology to make decisions much more understandable than they are. There's no reason why Centrelink can keep giving letters that don't make any sense. We can start to use risk tools, not just to identify and classify people, but to say, okay, what can we do in this risk tool? What does that risk tool tell us about reducing risk? What can we do? The fact that you're of a certain age or a certain ethnicity, you can't change, but there may be things that we can do. And risk tools and models of risk should be used increasingly to be able to help, rather than just to classify and stream people. We can also start to think about more about the ways in which automation and digital knowledge can help stream and target support. So the problem with a lot of automation is that the imagination is, let's automate for everybody. And we can think about the diversity of society. There may be a lot of people who are like in the process of the banking and how it's changed over the decades. The majority of the people quite happy banking online, etc. But there's going to be a small percentage of people or some certain types of transactions where that's not appropriate. So we need to start to think about using digital technology to work out, well, when is it appropriate just to leave people to themselves to navigate with Centrelink? And when is it, and what circumstances do we really need to have people to engage with people in a more detailed way? So you can think about legal aid organisations having more automated processes to assist with templates to address fairly standard routine legal advice, but have more complex ones that are streamed through to the lawyer. We can use data analytics for better geo-targeting of resources. But we need to, as I said, to take the focus of the values to be about supporting and not surveillance. And that's the risk that there is always there, that it's used to surveil and control. But at the same time, we can also start to think about what can we do outside of government to using digital technology. So I want to give the example of the Not My Debt website that was created by Lindsay Jackson to help enhance this. So this is the Not My Debt website. It allowed people to tell their stories, but it also allowed them to, with a click box, to lodge an appeal to the process. And so this was really important. Very basic forms of technology, but it gave huge visibility to society, to social media, and even some of the mainstream media, particularly The Guardian, were able to pick up on this. And highlight the ways in which the Robodebt was impacting on people, but also enable people to more easily engage with government. I'm also working with the Economic Justice Australia, the welfare rights peak body, to develop a data extraction tool to help them help their welfare rights lawyers to make better understanding of the information that they get from Centrelink to engage with their client case. The welfare rights lawyers are often given hundreds of pages of documents from Centrelink and trying to work out what the situation was for the client, and what the actual legal issue is quite difficult. And so we're working with them to actually improve their capacity to make sense of all of these hundreds of pages of documents. Other ways in which we may be able to start using technology is to help with using things like ChatGPT to help with pro forma appeals and legal letters. I also think there's space for enhancing the expertise of users of social services, helping each other navigate, just as we have Facebook groups that help each other. And also within both inside and outside of government, that we can start to language translation is getting better and better, particularly even around very small and languages that are very not very well used. So I think that is the end of why I went through very rapidly on that conversation. And so I've left enough time there for questions, and I hope that's useful. So do you want to chair the questions, Amy? Is there questions to follow through on?
Thanks so much, Paul. We just have a test fire evacuation going off in the background. So I'm not sure how long that's going to go for. I don't know if you can hear that online. The timing is impeccable. So, I mean, I can chair if you can't hear the noise. I think it's okay not to evacuate.
If you need to go, I can respond to people's questions.
Yeah, I think it's stopped now. It's okay. I think, yeah, if you'd like to chair it for a minute, and I'll just work out if I need to evacuate, and then I'll be back online in a second. Thanks.
If anyone would like to ask a question, just doing the question. Melissa, EJA stands for Economic Justice of Australia. It is the peak body that represents all welfare rights organisations like Basic Rights Queensland, New South Wales Welfare Rights Organisation. And EJA is headed up by Leanne Ho. Once people got their hands up.
Yeah, we've got a question from Rebecca Donnelly, Paul.
Hello.
Is that in the chat, is it?
Oh, sorry, I'm up the front, just with a hand raised. Rebecca. Thanks so much, Paul. That was fascinating and really helpful to get a great overview. It was probably more a reflection than a question. It was in relation to thinking through, firstly, the values was really, really good to understand. but also thinking around things like, say, writing funding submissions, or like even as simply as applying for positions or jobs, that you could use something like a chat GPT to create or build information around putting in submissions for funding, but then the importance and I guess due diligence on those processes to ensure that you're having conversations with the people who are actually going to be running and delivering those sorts of services, or as you would in, say, a recruitment process, having an interview to talk through, or a practice example of application of skill. So it calls out that whole generative, just is it just words or is it actually actions? Can you put the actions to the words or the methodology?
Was that a question?
Sorry, no, it was probably more just a reflection, and
Yeah.
thinking if that's something that you can see, just the importance of reflecting diversity as our process, like not just AI or generative technology alone.
Certainly you do, and this is where you need to come with the idea that diversity is there, and you need to think about how diversity is represented in the technology or built into the technology, because it doesn't necessarily mean that it is just if you throw at a bunch of data. Yes, so it is really important that you have that mindset. And we know from the facial recognition story that because the data it was trained on was majority white, it did well in identifying white people, but it didn't do well with people who are non-white. And so this is the problem. If you've got people who have got unique or unusual circumstances, these systems are not that can't train well with that, don't work accurately. And that's one of the reasons why I said we need to think about, well, if we're building technology, where does the technology work well for, and who does it work not well for? But going back to your comment about helping with applications, I think this is where a lot of the chat GTP or these type of generative text things are really going to be picked up to help people generate a lot of text and doing a lot of the work that we often have to do, a lot of writing, and it creates that first draft or something like that we can help. Definitely. I don't know whether that answered the question.
No, it did. Thank you so much.
Antonio, question in terms of governance, what are the differing roles of states and Commonwealth governments to support risk management? That's an interesting question. I guess that goes back to what is the technology being used for? So I guess from New South Wales, I gave you the example from the New South Wales Office of Revenue, and clearly the social services that are delivered under state government law, state governments are responsible for managing that. And those types of things like Centrelink that are delivering those services are going to be the Commonwealth is responsible for that. But overarching that, it raises the broader question about the governance more generally, and about the ways in which we can see this problem that we've had with Facebook and other social media platforms. But how do we regulate that so that we reduce discrimination, disinformation, or abuse, etc., and the challenges of a nation state governing or regulating an international or global platform, and I think we're still working through how to do that. There is discussions happening within the EU. They have an AI Act and a Digital Services Act. The AI Act is designed to recognise those areas of AI that are high risk or medium risk, and have different levels of regulatory responsibility or associated with that. And there is some expectation that that might provide a lead for how other governments regulate. What is happening in generative AI, which is ChatGPT, it is actually built on a large language model, which is GPT-4. And there is also Bing. Bing Chat is built on those large language models as well. So these models are now what we call foundational models, and they are underpinning a lot of things. And we expect a huge proliferation of new tools and apps and things that will be built on these foundational technologies, which begs the question about, if we build something in Australia based on these other foundational technologies, what responsibility do we have, or who's responsible for whether the foundational technology is problematic or not? The government has actually received a report from the Australian College of Learned Academies, ACOLA, on generative AI, but it has not yet released the report. And so the Australia haven't really articulated very much what governance or legislation it's doing in this space, but I suspect it will have to move pretty soon because other places are already.
Thanks so much, Paul. I'm back online now. Apologies for before. We have had some questions. I'm not sure if you've gone through them all in the Q&A area, or if you can see them.
Sylvia's popped one up. Not sure if this is related, but can you talk a bit about the risk of people losing employment due to increased use of AI? I think the story of job loss as a result of new technology is something that comes up again and again and again. We've heard that probably about 10 years ago, I think it was Cambridge put out a report that basically said a third of the jobs, or a quarter of the jobs, will no longer exist in 10 years' time. I think we need to look at history. Karl Marx was writing about 150 years ago, and he was talking about automation technologies of labour there. We have not seen a sudden unemployment over those periods of time. Yes, there are jobs that no longer exist, like typists. I don't know how many people were around to see a typing pool. They don't exist anymore. But there will be jobs that disappear. But I think what we know from history is that what we do is we build greater capacity, build on what we've got. We create new jobs in different spaces. And what the history shows is that what we've seen is a growth in service industries across the last century. And this is where a lot of the work will be in. I think like social services is a growth area, health services is another growth area. And I think those are places where we're going to continue to see a lot more growth in those spaces. Just reading through Nicole's comment. Thanks, Nicole. How do you keep informed of these tools? I had this workshop yesterday on generative AI as part of our research centre, and I actually asked the question to one of our IT people, and they just said, "Oh, they just live this stuff." I can't keep up myself. The way I keep aware is on Twitter, and I just get a number of new notifications of every time. I think that I don't know where else to, maybe just doing a search every time, every now and again, and just to see what's happening in the space. I think in terms of the ethical considerations, first of all, question is to ask, well, what are the limitations of that technology? So in ChatGPT, how accurate is it? And to make sure that we're not relying on it without recognizing its accuracy. So that means, like, producing something on ChatGPT, but rereading it too, having the human in the loop over the top of it to make sure. The other key important point is to say what biases are in the technology, what it's been trained on, and some of these are very difficult questions to know from the general public to know these things, but I mean, maybe these questions can be something that QCOS can engage with as a group at another time, updates in those types of areas. The other, I guess, is, well, how do you use that in relation to a person? And I think we're taking, it's not like we take a view that the computer says no approach means that you give all of the credibility to the computer or the tool. We don't really want to do that. We want to make sure that we are in control. And the other elements, I think, also in a lot of automated decision making is just make sure that the input data that you're putting in is correct. That you're working with a client, that their information that you've got is correct, and that the technology is assisting you as a human service provider rather than it doing everything for you. And I think for me, the risk is about, well, what are you using it for? If you're using it to draft letters, well, there's a low risk. If you're using it to make a decision about someone, about whether you're going to take them into out of home care or not, that they are significant risk responsibilities. So it depends on what are the outcomes that the person is facing. Is it a high risk circumstance, or is it a low risk circumstance?
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole, for asking.
Thanks so much, Paul. I think we might need to start wrapping up there. I feel like we could go for another hour on this topic. There's so much to talk about. And yeah, I think we'll try and address, I know there's some questions that we didn't get across, so we'll follow up with those people individually offline if we can. I'd encourage everyone to continue to connect, particularly on our Teams forum, where we can share some more information with regards to all of this, and continue that conversation. So my reflections are, I guess, I think that really important aspect of where you mentioned focusing on values of supporting, not just surveillance. I love that term. I think you've really highlighted, that tension between doing what is fair and just and ethical, although that shouldn't really be a tension, that should be, best practice, but then also keeping up with all of these emerging technologies, and acknowledge that there is some forms of fear and reluctance with these technologies, but also excitement and anticipation as well of adopting it. So I think, yeah, really keen to continue these conversations as a sector. Love to hear some more from community services around how you're using automation or automated decision making in your organizations. We just have a few more slides to go through just to finalizing today. We'll definitely share all of the resources in the post-event email, and if you're happy, Paul, we'll share your contact details as well, not to add too much more workload onto your already very busy schedule. I thought I would share some links in addition to what Paul has already mentioned. There's a reference link with a list and links to some additional resources and articles and webinars around AI and automation and ChatGPT. So if you do wish to explore those further in your own time, I'll share these in the chat. As well as also, I just wanted to mention, so these are all the resources. There's 2 slides of it. In addition to it being Data Science and AI Week this week, it's also Neighbourhood Centre Week. And this year's theme is Locals Connecting Locals. So Neighbourhood Centres Queensland is launching their 2022 Sector Impact Report today. And so if you're interested in this, their report, they're hosting a Zoom session online at 12 noon. And I'll share that link to attend that webinar as well. In addition to that, for Neighbourhood Centre Week this year, QCOS has partnered with PlaceScore to participate in the 2023 Australian Livability Census. So in 2021, PlaceScore facilitated the first national livability census with 44 local governments participating and over 32,000 records collected directly from people across the country. And so this census is held every 2 years, and it's a large social research data set regarding livability values and performance. And it captures community values, strengths and priorities with both qualitative and quantitative data, including what is most important to you in your local neighbourhood, and what would make your neighbourhood a better place to live. So anyone and everyone can complete the census. The census is available in English, Mandarin, Arabic and Hindi. And we'd really appreciate community services distributing and promoting the survey to reach the communities that you serve, and to demonstrate our capability as a sector to capture a diversity of voices and perspectives. So the survey is open now until the 30th of June. If you'd like to promote the census to any of your networks, the QCOS URL is on the screen, and I'll share it in the chat as well. So we also have a upcoming webinar on the 22nd of May. It's with Stacey, who coordinates our Quality Collaboration Network in collaboration with Info Exchange, and they're hosting a webinar on not-for-profit digital technologies across Australia and Queensland, key statistics and actions for your organisation. There's also, we wanted to highlight, there's another survey that's open at the moment, and we're participating in this year. It's called the Digital Technology in the Not-for-Profit Sector Survey. So that survey informs the report that is going to be the focus of the webinar on the 22nd of May as well. So that's a really important survey for the sector. It includes questions on data and digital infrastructure, remote working, digital capability and skills, digital marketing, cybersecurity, challenges, opportunities, priorities, and emerging technologies for the not-for-profit sector. And I often refer to those results in our Research Evaluation Network webinars too. So it'd be really great if you can take 15 minutes of your day to complete that survey. So I've also included the draft plan for the network for the rest of 2023. So we have no webinars coming up in June. That was quite intentional, as our team is busy with the budget analysis and preparing data profiles for our community town hall engagement events. And also collating some initial findings from our community services data demonstration project. So our next webinar is on the 27th of July. It's a topic on building a data-driven culture, key principles for community service leaders. So our guest speaker for that event is Ruth Knight from the Australian Centre for Philanthropy and Not-for-Profit Studies. So I will send out an email for registrations when it's live on our website. And thank you very much for joining us today and for staying online and engaging with the discussion today. Thank you so much, Paul. It's been a pleasure to have you as our guest speaker. We also have some polls for the webinar today, and so we'd really appreciate your feedback, and we'll launch the polls in a minute, and I will share all of the resources from today.